right, good morning, everyone. I would call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call. Councilor Lombardi.
I'm here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
I'm Councilor Cook, and I am here. And from staff, we have Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland with us today.
And is Assistant Mayor not coming?
And the Assistant Mayor is out today
Oh, okay.
at a family issue, so she will not be here. But we do have quorum, so we can move forward with review and approval of the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes? I guess that's from April
Yes.
9th?
Yes, they're short.
Yes, unfortunately,
You were not here.
I was not there for the,
Yes.
so I have to recuse myself from that.
I will ask the Deputy City Manager, how do we handle this? We've got
I've read
two of
them,
four.
but I,
So as a practical matter, you don't actually have to be at the meeting in order to
Approve
vote
the
on the
minutes?
minutes, because obviously one can review a meeting online. Plus, if you have confidence in the minute taker, you're allowed to rely on the professionalism of the minute taker. So you have your options. I don't know if you reviewed the meeting from April 9th.
I have, but now it's,
So
so
your call, whether you
I'll
vote on them or not.
allow John and Kate to comment first then.
Are there any comments on the minutes from April 9th?
No, I thought they were complete.
I would agree. I think that they're succinct and provide a general outline of exactly what we did.
I'd move that we approve the minutes of April 9 and April 29.
Second,
Okay. And I should note that the April 29 are not really minutes, they're notes. So let's be clear that they're notes
Correct.
from April 29th. So,
Okay.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The minutes and the notes are approved. We will start out our discussion today with training, or actually, that's what is next on the agenda, but we might wait a little bit to see if the city attorney has a chance to join us and flip-flop our agenda here and start with Public Art Review Committee ordinance draft changes instead. As you will all remember, at the City Council, we referred a request from the Public Art Review Committee to review their establishing ordinance, the existing ordinance for Percent for Art, and the City Council policy on art to the Governance Committee for review and combination of the three. The request was really designed to reduce confusion, I think, around having two different ordinances and a policy separately.
Hi, so sorry, I'm running late, and everybody, this is our new legal intern.
Yeah.
Welcome.
What's your name?
Welcome.
Ben?
Please
Ben.
join us wherever you like.
Yes, he's here from BU. He'll be with us for the summer. So
Great.
have a seat.
We flip-flopped our agenda to start with public art because we knew that you had another
I was
meeting
stuck,
abutting
yeah.
this one. So,
We
so
wanna
we will go
switch?
through,
It's okay.
we
so
want to switch back? Are we good with reviewing this? We can probably, we
So
can.
jump on public art.
Okay, let's go ahead and continue our review. What I did here for the committee's reference is I went through the two different ordinances and combined them where appropriate, and then took the policy language from the policy and inserted it into the ordinance where appropriate. So I will share that on the screen for everyone at home. This is a draft. I should be really, really clear. This is the first time this committee has seen this draft. So I think that's important for everyone at home to know. And it goes from being two separate ordinances, one that's in the administrative section on the establishment of the Public Art Review Committee, and one that's an added ordinance on funding for public art, and inserts that language from Public Art Review Committee establishment into the funding of public art ordinance. This is the same model that we see for parking and traffic safety. You know that their ordinance is not actually in the administrative section of the ordinance. They're establishing, it's it's in the traffic section. So, and they have just a referral note. And so I think that that would be appropriate here as well, that there would be a referral note in the administrative section on public art review, C, the funding of public art ordinance. So that would be my first suggestion. But then you will see, I followed the request exactly from the Public Art Review Committee on what they wanted, adding language where it did not exist in blue, from the funding for public art policy, so for the city. And so you will see that. I also added, they asked, so that's what you see in section 11700. This is language from the public art policy that was inserted. Then in 11701, I added the word temporary because they wanted to make sure that everyone understood that there was also purview over temporary art, things that are temporary in nature. For example, a traveling exhibit of a piece that comes through town. And then the next change is in 1702. This is the really major substantive change that they're requesting for the funding for public art. They're asking for a change from currently, which is 2 to 15 million, to 5 to 30 million. And they requested that because of inflationary changes since this was adopted. And that would also reduce the trigger right now for public art. We encountered this, I should note, in the Public Art Review Committee on a recent capital project, the skateboard park. Whereas the city initially had budgeted for the skateboard park and hadn't planned to hit the threshold for public art, but then there were overages and we went over the threshold. This would eliminate that happening again on a project that's estimated to be in that $2 to $3 million range, and it would be much more obvious to us at $5 million. And so that's what the request is. They also made this change request because it's getting very difficult to find public art pieces that are substantial in nature for $150,000. So they're wanting that higher budget for major projects. And that's really what I think this was designed for.
I think what's also just a call out is that this refers to municipal buildings. So this does not cover, for example, our road projects, our consent decree, sewer and pipe projects. So it is related to structures.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the next potential triggering structure would be a potential police station. Yep.
If we did a partnership, say at Sherburne, that would be privately operated on public land. So I would think that would be no art.
No art. That would not trigger the public art requirement because it's not city funds that are expended. So I think that that's really the key here, is that it's city funds when we hit $5 million. That does not preclude them for choosing to do public art on that site. So,
Yeah.
and to request review from the Public Art Review Committee and a process for that. So that's kind of where this puts us. That's their request. The next section you'll see that is an addition is section 11705. And this comes straight from the Public Art Review Committee ordinance that we as a committee reviewed and passed and went to the council. Some language was added from the policy. And that's the language here in blue that you'll see. They asked for clarification on the role of the staff member on the committee because that wasn't clarified. We had done it we'd added a city council non-voting member, but we had not clarified the role of the staff person on the committee. And then I took out in section B the definition of public art because they requested to have the definition that was already in the funding of public art section in section 11701. So we left that one and took it out in the Public Art Review Committee definition. And then I added in section B there, the opportunity for land use boards to refer items to the Public Art Review Committee, which they have been having conversations with the HDC around those referrals, and also with zoning, I believe. And then moved the criteria that were in the policy to this section on establishing guidelines, which they have done, and they did it based upon that policy anyway. So, so that leaves the criteria there.
And those are not new,
Those are not new. Those were in our public art
Right.
policy for the city council. And then they have a whole set of guidelines that's several pages long that's based upon this, and they will review all public art based upon those extensive guidelines. And then under section, which is now 1706, this is the change, section B, we took out when, I took out when the city council will refer, because this assumes that there's no committee. You'll see this language there was, you know, to refer it to this other entity to review, or this other entity to review, or an ad hoc committee. But once you've established a public art review committee, you no longer need this criteria. I would say that it would be important to save this language should we ever decide we don't need a public art review committee, because then this language would need to go back into this ordinance. But as it is, the Public Art Review Committee would be available to review, and the council still reserves the right to request an advisory opinion from someone else. So I think that that's important. The council is always in charge of this. And then you'll see in 1707 and 1708, a lot of the language was taken in from the policy there. And then there's additional draft language to make it make sense in 1707. And then there's some additional language in 1708 as well, around deaccessioning. They were really concerned about, the only mention of deaccessioning art was really in the public art policy, not in the ordinances, and they were concerned that they wanted to be able to deaccession a piece should they need to at any moment. And then it was absolutely clear what the process is for that. I don't know that we have been following necessarily this process of filing things in the city art and artifact index. I'm not sure what that process looks like internally, but that's also important for everyone to know that we have everything cataloged. And that's held in the public library with the library trustees.
I have an organizational question.
Yes.
This has been a subcommittee or group of the cultural, but it's separated out into its own ordinance now.
Yes, it's been its own, it was originally the review process for funding of public art was done by ArtSpeak.
Yes.
And they would set up a separate ad hoc committee to do that. And since we established the Public Art Review Committee, they are independent and separate.
Okay, good.
And have been operating that way. And while they're not related to the New Arts and Cultural Commission, they do try to communicate with one another to make sure that no one's stepping on anyone else's toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1.707, or 1707, it reads to me as if the art committee is going to recommend what's donated, but I don't see any language about the committee having the option to not recommend it.
Ah. That might be,
I could envision somebody wants to make a private donation, but it's not something that the city would view as.
So it's to make a recommendation for or against acceptance.
okay.
That's-
Thank you.
That's important.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, because we have encountered that in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And will again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You also, we have to be cautious about what we accept because, and the library encounters this quite a bit, where people just want to donate an estate's books.
Right.
Is an easy way to, it's a write-off. And you don't want to be in that situation that the city feels obligated to accept something.
Yeah, and as it stands now, it looks like it would fall to the council to do that. But it'd be nice to have a committee come to the council and say, yeah, we looked at this and,
We don't recommend it.
yeah.
And the Public Art Review Committee just went through that process with a piece and recommended to accept it, and the city council did accept it. It was a lovely piece on the sand piles photo, but and they went through a pretty extensive process, 2 different meetings reviewing that. So I think it is helpful to not have the council trying to go through that.
Yeah.
I have a couple of comments when others are done.
Go ahead, as far as I'm concerned.
So 1.1700, I think you can change in that first section the "or" to "and." I think actually that's really what we mean. We'll take it any way we get it. And so I think it's actually an "and." The City of Portsmouth is committed to acquiring public art by donation, acquisition, and commission. Like,
Okay.
we'll take it all ways.
Okay.
And then question with regard to the second proposed amendment in that same section, the city will also establish it, that is a referral to the Public Art Review Committee, right?
Yes.
So I don't, it raised a question in my mind, like, oh, don't we have that in here? So I would actually take that out because the Public Art Review Committee is here, established. Because I think it raises the question, is there something more to do? But we've done it.
Because I wasn't sure if we needed that language at the beginning or if it was okay just to
No,
take it.
I like it just standing alone, personally. And just some capitalization stuff. When we get to the guidelines, so 1.1705, under the section B, powers and duties, where you drop the new guidelines, I assume you want an "and," so semicolons "and," to make it clear that it's all of those criteria
Yes.
should be evaluated.
Yes, I believe so. This is, the language was taken directly from the policy as it was.
And we get to fix it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I throw semicolons in. And then I would be interested in your thoughts on 1.1706, expenditure of public art funds. And here's where I kind of niggle things out here. So we've got that paragraph A, which no recommendations were made to, where it says, no less than 90% of the principal amount of public art contribution generated by any particular building project shall be expended on the site of that project, unless the city council votes specifically otherwise to redirect the funds for other public purpose. I guess the question I have is, that 90% is kind of a weird, hard, fixed number, because then you're also requiring at the same time like an absolute 10% for outdoor art, and it's pretty hard to meet exactly that 90-10 split when you're going out for proposals. And so I feel like if we could be a little bit clever to find a way to make this more of a guideline or a range that the park is going to be able to utilize more creatively, because you may find the perfect piece of art for a location and it's only, say, 50% of the amount of the contribution from, say, a new facility, or you've got a big chunk of money and you'd want to save that remaining amount because you've got a smaller project and you want to do a bigger sculpture somewhere else, and you want to
That
I
happened with
think-
the sewer plant.
Exactly, so,
We had more money than we knew what to do with, and we had to go to the council and vote
right.
to split some off.
Right, and so if you want a little more flexibility, given that you have a park now, I guess the question would be whether you want to try and tweak that a little bit, knowing that it's really hard to hit an exact percentage when, someone who's looked at art proposals, yeah, it can be, is that exactly 90%? Or you might want a little more, for a particular piece of art, to be maintained for stewardship, simply because, as we've discovered with, the African Burying Ground Memorial Park, for example, some of the figures just need a little more love and attention because of the nature of the work. And so having a little more in the buffer. I also think it would be nice if it were clearer how the city gets out money for its repair work, which I have to look at more closely. So if we hire a consultant to come in and do $5,000 worth of repair work on a sculpture, are we going through all the formalities of that? So I would like to kind of noodle that over a little bit more, but any thoughts you have, I figured I'd put them out there now.
I think I should add in that one of the requests from the Public Art Review Committee, the only one I wasn't able to address,
Yep.
was a request to make expenditure of funds a little more flexible.
Okay, so how about we work on that for the next meeting? Because I would agree with you. I think
Yeah,
we could
that sounds-
probably do a little better there, given, I think
And
we
they're
all
in the
want the same
process of
thing.
reviewing some projects right now, so.
Yes, they have an RFP out right now that is closed, and they're about to start reviewing projects
Yep.
for Pierce Island. So they just have gone through this process.
Yeah.
Again, it'll be interesting to see, once they complete it, what their thinking is. But that was one of their requests, is more flexibility, because what happens is if you have a project that doesn't have a huge amount of funding, it hits the threshold at a low level, and you may want to do a bigger piece there. It's nice to have a little bit of money sitting in the Public Art Trust that you've reserved,
Right.
because it means you get to have that really special, unique piece.
Exactly, and that's my thought, too. It's just, okay, so let's work on that, but otherwise, it looks good.
I think that I should note, too, that I think the Public Art Review Committee will be fine with any adjustment there, as long as it is very clear that the remainder of the funds go to the Public
Stay
Art
in the
Trust.
trust.
Yes, and that they aren't
How it gets
siphoned
to
off.
be used.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
You could actually say, up to 90% of the principal amount of public art contribution generated, instead of this, no less than 90%.
No less
Right.
than, yeah.
Yeah, that might work as a simple,
And then you don't have a minimum,
yep,
but you have sort of an indication that,
Yeah.
you want to use a good amount.
yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that might be an easy way.
And is there a need to designate part of that? If a particular piece of art is something that requires more maintenance, like you talk about the African Burial Ground, that just requires more maintenance than the Whale in Prescott Park, for example. Or maybe the Sail in Bohanco Park,
Yeah.
so.
There will be some projects that might.
Yeah,
When
so-
you do multimedia, which they've discussed, is what happens when you have screens in multimedia, and it's not just maintenance, maybe you have to do replacement
Yeah,
at some point.
so maybe there has to be some flexibility in saying, okay, well, rather than just going into the general fund, this piece of art requires, I'm saying general fund of the trust, this piece requires annual maintenance, for example.
That would be something that we need to check into in the way that the trustees handle the Public Art Trust, and that designation. that percentage designation, how much is specifically designated within the trust?
I know, I think we may need to
Work on the language. of
work on the
trust.
language, you know, and I'm noodling out how to, in my head, how best to accomplish this task. Because the trustees of trust funds don't want discretion. They want to see a clear communication from the city manager or the vote of the city council, and they're just applying, you know, the trust terms to the conditions for release. And so the other thing we can do is we see Tom Watson pretty frequently, and it might be helpful for us to connect with him and say, here's what we're looking at for tweaking the language to make it more flexible, and here are the criteria we hope to establish on how to get money from the trust. Are you comfortable with this? And he's usually pretty good about providing feedback, like, yeah, that looks clear, there's a clear path, clear criteria. We would be able to implement those. So I think that's a conversation we can have after we play with the language here on this part of how to hold and manage the money there.
Yeah, by the same token, I think we don't want to encourage a lot of art that requires a lot of maintenance, too, and that,
Public Works would thank you for that.
yeah.
Is that in your guidelines?
They,
Cost and installation and maintenance of artwork, yeah.
yes. Yes, it's important to note that they have even more extensive guidelines. Some of them are around durability of projects. So they're really mindful that they don't want something that they need to worry about its durability in the community, or kids climbing on it and it breaking, or
Or people who are inebriated climbing on it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the Public Art Review Committee, we are very fortunate that it's led by an attorney right now who has a lot of experience with public art. So she's very mindful and has worked with the committee to be very mindful around those issues. So I have a question. With the changes that we have received from the Deputy City Manager, how does the committee feel about me taking this back to the Public Art Review Committee as it is with changes tomorrow? They're meeting tomorrow. I would have it sent out to them today to look at so that they can give their reflections before we meet again.
Sure.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Do you need a vote for that?
I don't think so. I think that we've just been tasked with working on this. I think that we can work back and forth with them. And I can have them look at it and then get back to us and then put the changes that we've received, and we can start talking. I'm happy to speak with Tom Watson, with the staff, to see what we can do to make that, to make recommendations on that section around funding, and then get this back to the committee. Sound good?
Great,
Okay. Great.
thank you.
I am mindful of our time. I want to make sure that we have a chance to, I don't want to keep anyone more than an hour if I can avoid it today. I want to go back now to training for city volunteers. And first, we'll see if there are any updates from the staff, and then look at the draft volunteer training policy.
So I was able to really concentrate and go through the manual itself yesterday, and I made a bunch of little minor grammatical capitalization type edits throughout, and I think I sent it to you and Suzanne, but I'm not sure if it went because I did it from home, and apparently my new computer wasn't accepting my Wi-Fi, so I can get that out to you today. Those are, like I said, they're minor edits just for consistency on a number of things and capitalization. But the substance of the manual, I think, is great. I think it covers all of the aspects of training that we would like to do. And the next step is for me to do more with the policies. That would be embedded or linked, however we decide to do this, or however Power DMS can do this, to have the actual, the volunteer training policy is going to link to this, and this will link to a number of other policies, the ethics, code of ethics, and the conflict of interest policy, and I'm working on a new standards of conduct for volunteers, as well as a number of other policies that are highlighted in this that will be embedded or linked throughout. So I think we're on our way to, it's a really good start, and
I think it's good. Reading through it, I had a couple questions that some things seem to conflict. One is in the relationship with city staff. Let's see, I have that highlighted. Following items brought to the board and commissions.
I didn't. Do you have an extra copy, Susan?
I probably have,
Is it the same as
there's only been minor edits.
Okay.
this is what you sent out with the email is the same as what you have there?
I think what went out in the email went from Kate, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what I sent out a while
then-
back, yes.
Yeah, and then I just worked on that and made grammatical changes.
Okay.
Which you probably don't have, so.
There was something about presenting to the city council and that the only it has to be in either case the council liaison is a communication between the council and the committee to deliver both to and from the city council. But earlier it states that only things that are presented to the city council by the committee as a whole should be presented to the council. I guess that's, and I'm looking for.
Okay. I know that there was an effort to try to guide that communication process to particularly avoid right-to-know issues, quorum issues, et cetera.
Right.
But also to have, if the subcommittee is speaking to the council, that they're speaking with one voice, essentially, like here's the committee recommendation, although there is room in here for the dissenting opinions to also present their viewpoints to the city council when it comes to that. And I know that there is quite a bit here about the staff liaison.
Yeah, the role of and this is the role of the council liaison a little farther down, I think.
Okay.
The challenge here is we want to make sure that it reflects current practice.
And the best practice that, we're hoping to achieve.
Right.
Exactly.
Areas to improve.
And the challenge we have, I feel like right now, and this is structural, it's not something that's easy to fix, is that committees that have a council member have a little bit more voice, because it's easy for a council member to put something on the agenda and raise it and do updates. Whereas committees that don't have to request to be on the agenda for a volunteer committee report. That's a little more challenging right now, but given the number of committees we have, it would be very difficult for council members to staff all of them too. So, and some of those committees operate really well without a council member. I'm thinking like the cemetery
Maybe better.
committee probably doesn't need.
No comment.
I know. So, the cemetery committee, for example, really doesn't need probably a council liaison, and they do a very good job reporting to the council on their own. So,
The reason this arose for me was that sitting on the Economic Development Commission, I had the thought that maybe I should be reporting back to the council what the commission is up to. But then, again, I think that is not an accurate thing, because I wouldn't necessarily be reporting the content of the commission's work. So I'm hesitant to do that, because it just seems like it's very clear that these commissions and committees need to report as a whole and representative of the committee. And just my opinion of what happened at the Economic Development Commission is probably not valuable in that way.
And so I think that's done differently with every committee, really, that I've experienced. But like parking, traffic, and safety, there's usually an update coming from Councilor Bagley, right? But that doesn't happen out of the other 49, 50 committees that you have on a regular basis. So I think you could develop whatever you think would be the best method of communication, or how you'd like to do it. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, here's an update, at the last meeting we talked about A, B, and C, versus somebody coming in front of the council saying, here's a proposed policy or ordinance or endeavor that we want to engage in and we want the council to adopt.
So that's why, I mean, the language under the role of the council liaison, and then later on, the presentation of information to the council has to be by either the chair or an appointed person from the committee, representing the voice of the committee. And I thought I highlighted that somewhere here too, but I'm not.
You know, in practice, I don't think a committee ever sends a recommendation to the council without a vote behind it. And I was in some of the training manuals that we looked at from other communities. One of them said an obligation of you as a committee member is you'll have to vote. You know, when decisions have to be made. That's our practice now. Do we codify that? I don't know.
I think each committee varies too.
Yeah.
Some committees are less formal than others. And some, they'll vote to send a recommendation forward, but they expect their council liaison to do that because they don't have, I'm thinking specifically the Sustainability Committee doesn't have a formal chair. Well, they have someone who's a named chair, they
Have a rotating chair.
So they ask their council liaison to bring things forward, but they do vote to do that. Some of the committees that I sit on, like Public Art, they will bring things forward, but then they will also ask me to bring things forward, you know, depending upon how it's being handled. If it's a report out, they want to come and present it. But if it's just a request like this ordinance change, that's an easy one. They've already written the memo. Could you put this request in? So I think some of it's about the committee's culture. I think, though, it would be nice to clarify that communication either comes as a report out from the committee or through a council liaison or through a staff liaison. So that it's not, you know, so that it's not just individuals necessarily, unless it's they've been sanctioned by the committee, and otherwise they're coming to public comment,
Yeah.
because anybody can come to public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And PTS is an interesting exception, right? Because by ordinance, when the council approves their minutes, they approve temporarily any of the decisions they've made. I don't know that any of our other committees have anything like that.
I don't know if anyone else's ordinances change as frequently. I don't think that that's typical,
Right.
yeah.
Well, they have the minutes, and then they also have, it's not, they don't call it an action sheet.
Action, yeah.
It is an action sheet, so, but that seems to have come into one document now. So,
It comes as an omnibus at the end of the year. We adopt it once a year, but it is actually ordinance changes that come as an action sheet, but that get adopted in advance.
I mean, the whole purpose of kind of the unusual structure that you see with parking, traffic, and safety is because we want to be able to make adjustments quickly, test them out, see if they work, and yet still have enforcement authority. So that's why there is this regular trip to the city council to get your official blessing so that we can actually make those
Yeah.
changes in the field and enforce them for that period of a year, and then we, anything we like, we keep. But that's why it's special, because of the enforcement piece that is attached to that.
so other than that point, I thought this was a very good document.
It's nice.
Yeah, I liked it too.
Yeah, it covers just about every aspect of training you could think of. And I don't know if we talked before with the group about our plans for how
No.
to go forward with this?
No, I think that that's important. I don't know, you'll see the city attorney mentioned the code of conduct policy as well. Some of this is, we're missing some policies for volunteers. So we had some discussion around that. And then, and we have this other policy as well, the volunteer training policy, which provides us the authority to move forward with the training manual and starting that training process. We've always had the authority. It's not really the authority. Provides us the guidance at the council level. But City Attorney Morrell, if you want to add.
So our thought is that we're, once again, going to be using our new Power DMS for volunteers to be able to review the manual online on Power DMS. And then they can document when they've completed it, they check it off, just like, internally we're doing with city employees to keep track of who's reviewed certain policies. But also, the other aspect is that we're hoping to do very short video segments and embed them into Power DMS. So the legal department would be doing shorter, short chunks, like it will take somebody a little bit of time to go through this whole manual and really digest it. I mean, they might skim through it, and it's a lot to take on as a volunteer. So we have a number of short vignettes to explain that, and also add right to know training that will complement it's suggested several times in the manual that they read the RSAs, but I don't know that anybody's going to do that. So I think we'll prepare that type of training. So that's our hope, that the Power DMS does, we know it has that capability. We're just getting it up and going and learning how to use it. So my only thought about the policy, really, other than minor edits, was whether you want to say that the training would be annual. Did you want to put a time frame in that? Or, I don't know what works best, given how members of the committee are appointed or evolving, if you need them to review the training manual annually, or if it's just within so much time of them being appointed, or how you want to do that.
I would think every term, every 2-year term,
At the beginning of,
yeah. Because you'll have a potential crop of new appointees. But I'm just thinking and talking at the same time, which is dangerous.
My experience in nonprofit board work has been always that there are certain policies you want reviewed annually, like your conflict of interest policy. I would think right to know and conflict, it never hurts to get a reminder on right to know and conflict of interest and what the code, so if we do a new code of conduct, so that it's really clear what these key policies are. I don't know if they need to review everything, but maybe there's some things that are scheduled annually.
so you may want to think about adding that in the policy somewhere. I'm not sure as to how often and what portions you want them to review the manual or certain policies. So, and I don't know if we've actually implemented this yet, but I know my prior jobs, it was every year sexual harassment policy training or, review of policy is always top of the list, anti-discrimination.
Yeah. Those are important.
My suggestion would be that for purposes of this city council policy, you don't have to get into the weeds. You could wait until you kind of finalize the handbook and the policies and then just kind of work a schedule depending on what piece is where. But if you wanted to move the policy, it's just an option because it may change.
Right. There's a lot of pieces to how often and which policies you're going to want reviewed every year versus just upon, within 60 days of being sworn in or something.
Yeah, and I think I saw in the handbook, it says something like you'll swear, get sworn in within 5 days of appointment, but you might be on vacation for 2 weeks. You might, because sometimes applicants don't even know that they're coming up for consideration, so I made a note to adjust that.
Yep. Right. It probably should say sworn in before you're seated.
Yes, that would be good. I did bring down our internal non-discrimination, anti-harassment policy, knowing that we talked about sort of making sure that some piece of that gets captured in the volunteer training. So I can share with you these copies. You can take a look and see how applicable or not it might be. And then I also brought the standards of conduct and code of ethics policy. Again, this is for employees though. But again, it might just give the jumping off point. Because it has a lot of the same, be professional, respectful, language that you would expect to see. And of course, we refer to the code of ethics or those sections that are applicable to the employees.
And one of the things that the city attorney and I had discussed was that we should not only have this volunteer training policy, but we should consider just a code of conduct policy in general for all volunteers. This was the piece that when we were having those discussions on ethics and the ethics ordinance and conflict of interest policy, that we were having troubles finding, like, where do you put this guidance for what your code of conduct should be? Because you don't really have it in an ordinance because a violation doesn't really trigger potential removal. But you do need it written somewhere so people know what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do in serving, besides just in a training manual. And that's general guidelines. What are the general guidelines behind the training manual is really what we're looking at.
And I would say keep in mind that you have volunteers that are actually sitting on boards, committees, and commissions, but we actually have other volunteers who may come out for a day of caring or giving or something along that, or they work with, the environmental planner or someone to go out and do invasive species removal. Classroom students who come under the supervision of a teacher for different projects. So,
Precocious.
we just keep in mind volunteer is a bit broader than simply a volunteer committee member. And we do typically have our volunteers who are doing those other types of work. There's a special release form, there's a supervisor, there's a staff liaison, and those pieces. So just keep that in mind, that when we use volunteers, it's bigger for us than it might be as you currently envision. But we do actually tend to reference, hey, you have to follow our policies. The applicable ones would be shared, like smoking on the municipal campus. And that's really up for the supervisor and the staff person to kind of suss out, if you will. Is this a couple hours of work in the field? And what
Right.
kind of guidance? Because we don't want to make it too burdensome for someone who's just coming for a few hours to help pull weeds or that kind of thing.
So we need to make sure we're specifying in anything we do, in the same way we do under objective and purpose in the draft volunteer training policy, that we're talking about volunteers for boards, commissions, and committee members.
At least for now, and then if we develop something else, but just recognize it's bigger.
Okay. Yes, I can absolutely see this. When I was working with the Y, often we had people who came and volunteered to do improvements to camp or clean up at camp, and that's one group of people, but then you have your volunteers that are working with campers who need full background checks. So I think that that's critical for people to remember. Yeah.
I don't know the capabilities of the software, but for our corporate training, it would tell our HR person who had completed it and who hadn't. And so there was accountability. And as publisher, I would get a list of people who had not yet completed it. And I don't know if that's work for somebody, but it's important.
That's what the system is designed to do.
Yeah.
To be able to track who has and who has not completed it and send follow-ups as needed, which we've already seen and implemented. So.
Great.
The last thing that we'd also discussed was potentially developing a secondary training manual and videos for land use boards specifically, because there's a different level of knowledge required there.
Right. So that would address all the quasi-judicial legal requirements for the land use boards. So we can do something separate and apart for them.
Okay. Yes, and we haven't seen a draft on that yet. I didn't draft anything, or I hadn't found anything specifically that was really applicable there, but I know that there are materials out there, especially, I think, New Hampshire Municipal
I was just
Associations.
going to say, the municipal association, I'm sure, has a handbook for land use boards that we could probably co-opt.
So if everyone has just a few minutes, let's look at the volunteer training policy quickly. This was sent out to you this weekend, and also it's the same policy we've been looking at here at the committee for over a month. There were minor changes recommended by the city attorney, currently where it says under E, review of relevant policies and ordinances, taking the "and" out there and moving it down after "as needed" in section G, as needed, semicolon, "and," so that it's really clear. That's just a grammatical change. But other than that, I didn't have any other recommended changes from anyone. This is the language that the deputy city manager had already reviewed and altered once. But if everyone is comfortable with this, then we can move it forward, noting that we don't have all the training in place yet, so I can hold it for the council until we think that we're closer. We can move it forward so we're not discussing it anymore, or we can hold it and not discuss it anymore until we get to that final stage where we're ready to present to the council. I think the council's schedule is a little too busy for the next month anyway, but it would be better, I think, to not send anything forward until we actually have the training manual finally approved and we're ready to launch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you don't know that, what changes might come up from that. But, yeah, so we don't have to look at it anymore right now.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, I did a bunch of grammatical consistency edits, picky things yesterday, so I can get that to you. But then the bulk of the next part of the work is getting the policies that are referenced here, drafted, so you can review those.
Okay. And do you want us, I should ask as a committee, to bring you any comments or recommendations on, I guess the policies we're concerned about are like the harassment, sexual harassment, non-discrimination, which we have now, the staff policies around that, and any conduct recommendations, so that we can get a head start before our next meeting. Does that make sense? Is everyone comfortable reaching out and sharing with the city attorney anything that
Sure.
any questions you have or concerns around this, so that she knows those in advance, so that we're not addressing those all in our next meeting? Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Homework assignment.
Yes,
It'll take a little thought process first.
that's right. So with that said, I think that that's everything on our agenda. It doesn't appear that there's anyone online for public comment or anyone in the room. Are there any announcements from anyone? No? So
Next meeting?
our next meeting that I have on my agenda is scheduled for, I believe, the 10th, which is 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks away. Is that enough time, or should we hold off until the 24th?
I'd recommend the 24th, given what's coming up on the 3rd and the 17th.
Yes, we have a busy council agenda for the next few weeks. That's why I'm flexible on this. If we come back on the 24th, though, what I would ask is that everyone get comments to the city attorney by the 10th.
From
So in the
this-
next 2 weeks, yes. Get her any comments, so that when we come back on the 24th, we're having a discussion about actual language rather than
Yeah.
how we want to alter ideas at that point. So that would be my request, and then we'll just meet on the 24th.
Let me just ask, are you okay with that? That means your park changes also wait?
I think the park changes can wait.
Okay.
Because the park won't meet again until the 26th. Well, they meet actually several times, but that's RFP review. They'll meet the 26th for their next meeting. So if we hold off to the 24th, then we can get the park changes in for city council on the 15th of July, hopefully.
And let's just make sure we coordinate so we can put it into proper ordinance form for adoption,
Okay.
with the little bit at the front and the back, and
Yes.
Cynthia can make it look bright for the clerk's office.
And if everybody's comfortable with that too, I believe that the park committee is really comfortable also working with staff on anything if they have any substantial recommendations back. And if everyone was comfortable with that, changing the 90% and getting the right language, and then Parks comfortable with what we end up with, we'll bring it back on the 24th. Okay?
Yep, and Susan, you want this directly to you?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you all. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Okay.
thank you.